One. Hey guys, I'm Caleb Giddings,
And I'm Keith Finch.
and welcome to another episode of Gunday Brunch. Brought to you, of course, by all of our awesome sponsors. Insert banner. And there's
Ta-da!
right, isn't this great? So, in our last episode, we took we took a bit of a week off. Said Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and that obviously prevented us from discussing what was the biggest bit of news in the self-defense area, I guess, self-defense field, self-defense.
Self-defense legal area as well as
Yeah.
self-defense theory. There's a lot of things that got touched on, and we've been able to sit on it a little bit longer. Obviously, between time of recording, guys, and time of publication, this may have changed even further. There are definitely hints of defamation lawsuits surrounding that, but that doesn't have a lot to do with what we're going to discuss, and that's the Rittenhouse case, the Rittenhouse verdict, and we're going to touch on a couple of other tangents here too. So
As you guys know, as everyone knows, Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted on all counts, not guilty across the board. Right off the bat, I think that based on the evidence that was presented in the trial, and that's a very important statement, that's the correct verdict.
Mm-hmm. I concur with that, having followed it closer than many, especially many online who are commenting about the verdict very, very loudly. You could not have come to another verdict given the evidence, given the case the prosecution made, and then given the case that the defense made. And I've seen every statement under the sun tossed out when it comes to the Rittenhouse case as, oh, well, this was just because he had the money to do it, and this and that and the other thing. If you look at the way the defense did their thing, they did an all right job. But if you talk to other defense attorneys, they'll point out a lot of errors that the defense, in fact, made during their presentation, and a lot of risks that were taken that the other attorneys would not have taken in the defense when they were making their case as the defense and to self-defense. But it's unequivocal that the prosecution was the best defense in the Kyle Rittenhouse case.
Good Lord.
The prosecution, I don't know what happened. I don't know what they were doing.
Well, and I can say we do have some good news out of the verdict as well, because if you guys remember in our last Rittenhouse episode, I was very pessimistic about there being rioting after the verdict. And as of right now, that's me knocking on wood because I'm hella superstitious. There have been there's been no rioting. There's been some protests.
There's protests. And that's fine.
Protesting is fine. Like it's, and this is something that I actually wanted to talk about. It's okay. So it's okay to think that the jury got it wrong and to protest about that, so long as you understand that the jury getting it wrong is the legally binding, getting it wrong, in your opinion, is still the legally binding decision, right? Like
that was the jury of his peers. That the way I want people to think about it, and this is the hardest thing, I think, is perspective. Is people's perspective. It's like, look, if you were in Rittenhouse's shoes in a very similar situation, wouldn't you want your 12 jurors to take a look at the evidence and decide in your favor based on that evidence? Or would you want them to go with the crushing weight of public opinion, even if public opinion was against you? Would you want them to take the evidence into account, or would you want them to take the socially conscious variant of public opinion into account when they made their decision? Which do you want at your trial?
Yeah. Well, and it's like a perfect example of this, obviously, is the OJ trial, right? Everybody knows everybody knows that OJ killed his wife, but he was still acquitted by the jury. And that means that because he was acquitted by the jury, it doesn't make it right for you to, it wouldn't have been right if somebody had gone out and murdered OJ in the result of that or something like that. But yeah, you can disagree with the jury, you can disagree with the Supreme Court. That's part of one of the fundamental rights of being an American, is being like, I don't like the way that works. Yeah, I don't like the way the system worked in this instance. Cool, dude. Go get elected, go to law school, become a judge, go to law school, be a lawyer, become a judge, change it.
Yeah, or legislator, or take that path, or even make a YouTube video about it.
Yeah.
Say why you think it is wrong, and here are your opinions on the subject, but expect to be taken as seriously as those opinions are grounded
Mm-hmm.
in reality. Like,
And speaking of opinions on the subject, let's talk about why we both believe that this was the right verdict.
it's one of those things that if you look at the individual, we can have the argument on whether or not it was wise for Kyle Rittenhouse to
Right.
be in Kenosha all day. And you and I both agree that it was not a wise decision for him to be there. That was never the question that was before the jury. That was never a question that the prosecution could bring, is that Kyle did not have a right to be there for some reason, whether it was he crossed state lines to be there, which he did not do with a firearm. He was just, he just drove 20 miles to Kenosha from his hometown, um, or anything like that. What was ultimately at risk, and we've had this discussion in circles, and we've had this discussion, here on Gunday Brunch, is, was the first shooting, was the Joseph Rosenbaum shooting going to end up being justified? Was Rosenbaum chasing him through the actions prior to the shooting? Would that end up being justified because there was a legitimate risk to Kyle's life? Would that be affirmed? You and I both took a look at that footage, took a look at the surrounding evidence as it was available, and we both said, yeah, I think it's legit. You and I both came down on the side that said, no, that first shooting was legit. That first shooting was self-defense, because you would in that situation be at risk of death or great bodily injury from being chased down by a man in a parking lot screaming at you, threatening to kill you, allegedly. And I think this was presented as evidence. Rosenbaum had verbally threatened Kyle and somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
to kill them if he found them alone. And then he found Kyle Rittenhouse alone, chased
Right.
him down the parking lot. And when he came into physical contact with Rittenhouse, that's when, he fucked around and found out.
Yes. Or as Tucker Carlson said, he died as he lived, trying to touch an unconsenting minor, which was the most incredible roast. I try to not take pleasure in the deaths of anyone. However, we can all look, I think everyone can agree that losing someone like Rosenbaum is no loss to society at all,
It
which
is not. I'm not sorry about it.
no, brings me
I'm
to
not.
the prosecutors trying to paint them as heroes, which was a line that was actually used in their closing arguments, was that these guys were quote unquote heroes for trying to chase down what they believed to be an active shooter, despite the fact that Kyle didn't fire the first shot. But apparently that's,
No, no. They believed the entire argument I saw summed up somewhere was that the prosecution's entire case rested on convincing the jury that all the things that they saw didn't actually happen the way they saw them,
Mhm.
and the way that I saw them, and the way that you saw them, and the way that everybody, including the prosecutor, saw them. What if they happened, but not that way? That was
Right.
their. That, what
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 if they
if
happened
everything
in
we believe is
Minecraft?
wrong? What if it's the Matrix, guys? Like,
I mean, it was
it was a very interesting effort, I think, and it goes back to, in my opinion, the political nature of the case. You're messing with a disabled gun, so I am now messing
yes,
with a disabled.
sorry. For anyone who's wondering, this is the Cold Steel LCR trainer. It fits all LCR holsters. It's very awesome.
This
So,
is
and I'm
XP 320, and it fits 320 holsters, and it has a magazine.
Yay! Ooh, yours has a magazine. Mine doesn't have any of that. One of the things that I also thought was interesting, and this is actually, I think, if you carry a gun for personal protection, you have to acknowledge that there is the possibility that you may have to shoot someone. And you
Yep.
also should acknowledge the possibility that you may have to shoot someone in circumstances which, while to you, may seem like clearly justifiable self-defense may not seem that way to everyone else. This is why I
Right.
joke with my wife that, like, if I have to shoot someone in a non-military capacity, in a non-on-duty capacity, I want that person to be a white guy with Nazi SS lightning bolts tattooed on his face, who is in the process of throwing a Molotov cocktail at a school bus full of disadvantaged children on their way to a STEM camp. Like, I want to
Yeah.
shoot that guy,
Yep.
because that's the guy that you shoot him. And even CNN is like, yeah, no, fuck that guy,
Yeah. That's the guy that I hope I get in the fight with. The clear cut case of, oh no, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
And
But that's not
speaking,
the reality.
yeah, that's not the reality, and we can see that in this case, and we can see that in other cases. And there was a case that I wanted to bring up, and it's the Ahmaud Arbery McMichael case,
Mm-hmm.
which I just got a notice that the jury has decided.
Oh, the jury has just returned just now?
The jury has just returned it just now. They're going away for murder.
Yep.
Yep.
Which is not surprising.
That
Uh,
is unsurprising given the facts in that case. Just like it's not surprising for me to see that Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted based on the evidence and based on what we saw happen. It's not surprising to me, nor does it dishearten me in any way from a self-defense law standpoint, from a legal standpoint, that the McMichaels and the other guy who recorded the whole thing are going to prison.
One of the
They're going to
biggest
prison.
differences, and I will say I haven't paid as much attention to the Arbery case as I have to the Rittenhouse case.
I can go through a quick rundown.
Hit them.
All right. So, quick rundown of the Ahmaud Arbery McMichael case. So, the McMichaels live in the neighborhood, and so does the other guy. They all live in the same neighborhood. They had a group chat going, or a Facebook group going, of, tracking petty crimes and whatnot in the area. There'd been a couple of break-ins, snatch and grab type situations out of cars, including the McMichaels' car, in which a pistol was stolen from them. The senior McMichael was a old hand in law enforcement, had done like 30 years with the county as an investigator. And then his son, they were both at the same residence when they saw Ahmaud Arbery in an open construction project across the street. And they both decided at that point in time, that's the dude who's been robbing, causing all this robbery, break-in, whatever. And so they decided to grab their guns, hop in their pickup truck, and chase him. Their neighbor, who was in the second truck and whose cell phone video is the definitive piece of evidence in this, decided to get in his truck and follow the McMichaels truck. So they chased Arbery down with two pickup trucks, all armed with guns, or at least the McMichaels were armed with guns. So at this point, you have a young black man whose the only actual evidence and the physical evidence taken from the property, but the only actual thing that McMichael saw was he was in the open construction project and then continued jogging on. That's all they had on Arbery at that time. They then inferred at, oh, this must be the guy or among the crew or whatever they happen to think, who's been, breaking in and stealing stuff and whatnot. So they chase him down in the truck. They confront him. The younger McMichael gets out with a shotgun to confront Arbery, who tries to flee and go around. And then, in my opinion, Arbery does the only reasonable thing as a young black man confronted by three white men with guns, and went for the closest guy with the gun.
Yeah. So, and that about tracks with what, like, I wasn't aware of some of the particulars of that, but the one thing I was aware of, and one of the reasons why I think there's a critical difference between this and the Rittenhouse case, is in the Rittenhouse case, the prosecutors attempted to portray Kyle as the instigator, as the one who initiated the violent contact, which led to those people's deaths. And as we saw with the videos and all of that,
by bringing the gun, and he wasn't.
Yeah. So, and that was the thing. He wasn't the one who initiated contact. Kyle was actively trying to break contact from an aggressive crowd when he eventually got caught by himself, by someone who had already threatened to kill him, and had to defend himself. That's pretty clear-cut self-defense to me. He was he was essentially trying, I mean, he was doing a poor job of E&E because he has no
Mhm.
training in E&E, but that's what he was trying to do. The key difference, at least to me, is that the McMichaels were initiating the contact. They were in pursuit of someone. They were chasing this guy down. And that
With
initiating contact and that pursuit is what led to Mr. Arbery's eventual murder, which we can now call
yes,
a murder because they
it,
were
it is
convicted of
it
it.
is confirmed a murder. They
Yeah.
are murderers. They have been convicted by the jury of their peers. I am not surprised. I'm not disheartened about this because it is a very these two cases very clearly delineate what active self-defense is, guys.
Yeah.
And it's at the more we can very clearly point to two otherwise similar situations, it's like, oh, well, this kid, had a gun and the other guy didn't have a gun, but it was self-defense. Yeah, that can happen. Well, here's a competing case where these guys had guns. Arbery did not have a gun, but the one who would have been justifiable in using force in self-defense, to include taking the McMichaels shotguns and shooting them all, would have been Arbery.
Yeah.
His defense attorney, if Arbery had lived and had taken the gun and held them, or taken the gun and shot them,
It would have been
which both
justified.
both very, very high risk, but it would have been justified because from his position, he had gone into an open construction site and looked around. I don't even give a damn if he pocketed anything. I honestly don't.
Yeah.
But he then ran on his way. Like evidence suggests he didn't at all. But he then jogged on his way. He was then chased down by three men with guns who were trying to detain him illegally and like pack him away. And they claim that they were just waiting for the cops to show up and talk to him about the break-ins and everything like that. Like, you can claim that all you want. You can say that all you want. Your actions still initiated the violent contact, and you brought the lethal force. So the whole argument that Binger was trying to make with Rittenhouse was actually true in
With
the
the
McMichael case.
McMichaels. Yeah.
It was actually true in the McMichael case because not because they brought firearms, but they brought firearms with intent to do unlawful things with them, starting with unlawful imprisonment, and it ended up in Arbery's death, which is now confirmed a murder.
So I think we can get some important takeaways from both of these cases. And obviously we've talked about takeaways from the Rittenhouse case about, not going to be in silly places with silly people and stuff like that. But also, Kyle tried to escape. He tried to break contact. He did things, after the initial fuck up of being there in the first place, which, hey, he had a right to be there. I don't think that was a smart choice. I will remain saying that wasn't a smart choice forever. But after that initial poor choice, he did things right. And that's part of why.
Just because it was a poor choice doesn't mean it was an illegal one, which was
exactly.
It was not an illegal choice, and it wasn't. And from your own particular moral compass, it may have been the choice that you felt should have been made or not. Me personally, still think it unwise. You personally still think it's unwise. But
now let's talk about the McMichaels, because here's what I want to hammer on this. There is nothing inherently immoral or unethical about wanting to protect your neighborhood. That is actually one of the most fundamental principles that human society works on, is wanting to protect your in-group and your neighborhood, your clan, your whatever. And that's fine. However, your concealed carry permit, your home defense gun, none of these things are a Batman badge. None of these things are a license to go out and detain people who are doing things that you think are naughty. And as you can see, doing that can result in life-altering permanent consequences, because a guy is dead who didn't need to be dead. And 3 people are going to go to prison for 20 years to life because they felt like their desire to protect this area was a Batman badge. And let me tell you what they could have done that would have been far more effective than chase some guy down in a truck. What they could have done is gone, there's 3 buttons on your phone. You press 9, you press 1, and then you press 1, and you say, hey, police, there's a guy in this neighborhood that we don't recognize. There's been a lot of break-ins. It's black male. He's 6'1". He's dressed blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. We used these cameras that everyone has in our pockets to take some really, really good photos of him so that, if you want more information, we can provide that to you. And we'll stay on the line until he leaves my field of view. But if you could roll a unit down here to investigate, that would be sick. Nobody probably would have died if they had done that.
Yeah. And even in the worst case scenario out of that is hopefully is Arbery has an awkward conversation with the police, and then the three guys who are now going to prison for murder have an equally awkward conversation with the police where they go, well, he was in the open construction project, and the cops go, and
yeah,
well,
exactly.
he could have, and then they go, and
yeah,
and
that would have been a much preferable outcome to a guy getting dead and 3 people going to prison. And here's the thing, I don't actually believe that McMichaels and the third guy are like inherently evil people.
I think they made the poorer of a series of poor decisions, because I don't think overt racism played a part in this decision.
No.
I think a very misplaced sense of protecting your community was, and a misplaced sense of authority.
Yeah.
And stupidity.
Yeah, I think the misplaced sense of authority is a big thing too. And, we could have a whole conversation about like systemic racism or something like that, and on a completely different podcast.
We could do less subconscious racism, systemic racism, cultural attitudes and things like that. We could have a very long and unfortunately, ill-informed discussion about
very
that.
Ill-informed.
Oh yeah. But when it comes to overt racism, like, I think the 3 guys who murdered Arbery were card-carrying KKK members. No, I don't think any of them were. I don't think any of their attitudes traced along those lines. I think they were just really dumb and did the wrong things. And now they get to go to prison for it because they did murder a dude.
Yeah, and that's, again,
sucks to suck, man.
If I was going to foot stomp any single one thing out of this, it would be, you're not Batman. You're not, and you're not even a cop. And, people, I guarantee someone in the comments will point out that at the time that they were doing this, Atlanta, Georgia had a citizens arrest statute on the books that allowed citizens to detain people for the suspicion of even misdemeanors. So, fun fact about citizens arrest: it is legal in all 50 states to detain someone for like a serious as a private citizen. If you catch someone in the act of a serious felony, like attempted murder or rape or things like that, you as a citizen can you can do that. That's legal. Is it recommended? No. But different conversation.
It is in fact legal. So that covers you in the instance of, hey, someone breaks into your house and you keep them at gunpoint, you're covered. You didn't unlawfully detain someone in that. Someone tries to murder someone else in front of you, and you're the concealed carry person who draws on them and holds them at gunpoint until the cops get there and take over the situation. Again, you are not unlawfully detaining someone in that situation. You did not commit an unlawful detainment. You were citizens arresting. That covers you in that type of situation. What it doesn't allow you to do is go full Paul Blart, which is what the McMichaels tried to do.
Yeah. And in Georgia, they had their statute allowed citizens to detain people for like misdemeanors, property crimes, and stuff like that. After Arbery's murder, they repealed that law. They're like, "Ooh, we should probably get this off our books," and they did. And the defense's case was built around whether or not that was a reasonable justification for their actions. Obviously, the jury said, "Hell nah."
Oh,
so again, and this goes back to a pet peeve of mine. Property isn't worth killing people over. Like most property is not worth killing people over or dying over, and
it really is.
When you take a gun, this is something that I think Craig Douglas talks about, is that when you take a gun to a potential use of force, even if you are only intending it to be a non-lethal use of force, to detain someone, you are creating the possibility of escalation to deadly force. And if you're the person who's initiating that force, you need to understand the potential consequences of it not being lawful self-defense.
And that was one of the things that the younger McMichael, the one who actually shot and killed Arbery, tried to use in his defense, as he was a member of the Coast Guard and received some firearms training when he was a Coastie. And the Coast Guard's a law enforcement branch, guys, for the most part. They're DHS, they're not DOD, and so they do have policing powers in a way that DOD
Wait, was
members
he like
don't.
a Coast Guard reservist when this happened?
I don't think he was in when this happened, but he pushed back on his firearms training, and he alleges that, oh well, we were taught in the Coast Guard that you could use a firearm to de-escalate a situation. And I'm sitting there like, you didn't pay attention.
Yeah, you
Like,
clearly missed a step.
You clearly missed a lot of steps, because in any of the use of force scales, in any of the escalations, de-escalations, they always emphasize, if you're paying attention, they always emphasize that it can go either way. It can go up, it can go down. So if you're using less than lethal force or detaining force, that could pacify a situation. It could also escalate a situation, and you must be ready for both. So the McMichael's defense in that regard was, oh well, I was just bringing the shotgun to help detain him, and he attacked me instead. It's like, yeah, him attacking you was an entirely reasonable response to his perspective on that situation. And it's one of those that I brought up at the time, and I will bring it up now. Had Arbery been armed at the time and shot the McMichaels, he very likely would have been found justified in self-defense,
Right.
based on the facts of the situation. Like, you got chased down by 3 armed dudes while you were running through this neighborhood and had just stopped in an open construction project. That's and Bro, nope.
So I just your comment about Travis McMichael and the Coast Guard. I just went on a little Google search quest here to find out what his rate was when he was in the Coast Guard. He was an ME. He was a mechanical. He was a mechanic. He worked on engines. He wasn't even a law enforcement rate. The Coast Guard has law enforcement rates. I forget what they are, because they were created after I left the Coast Guard. But there's no indication that he had actually any formalized law enforcement training in the Coast Guard. So we can get fucked.
Nope.
Sorry, I'm very passionate about
I did not. I knew that. I knew he was a mechanic, because the stories always mentioned that his actual job was mechanic, but he tried to bring and be like, oh no, when we were taught shotgun, this was how. Like, no,
fuck that guy.
That's like some little 92 alpha coming out. It's like, well, when I went through special forces in information in doc, like, shut up.
But you do make a good point. Like, if Ahmaud Arbery had a concealed carry permit and he had whipped out a Glock 19 and blasted those guys, justified. And I would have argued till I was blue in the face that is a clean shoot.
Yep, easily justifiable. Oh, dudes ran me down in a truck with guns, and I shot them.
I would have been lighting up the truck. Like, I see dudes coming at me in a truck with like. I need to caveat this. Obviously, I am not a black guy and I don't have that experience. However, if I was a black guy in the South and I saw dudes coming at me in a truck with shotguns, there's actually a cultural, like, that is a culturally significant sort of thing. Like, honestly, if he had, magically produced a 249, it was like, nope, fuck this. Justified, clean. So.
And I think there are some aspects of Georgia law that would cover him in that regard.
And having like a 249, hell yeah.
Yeah, because we both have a lot of friends who are in Georgia, and so Georgia law specifically comes up quite a bit. And I think under Georgia self-defense law, it really doesn't matter what weapon gets produced or the circumstances in which that weapon appears. If it's lawful self-defense, it's lawful self-defense.
So
the 249 theory could, in theory, have worked out.
Damn it! Now I wish he'd had with a Mac 10 or something. But anyway, just
would have been.
He would have been out of ammo, like real quick. All right, guys. So we're gonna put a bow on this one. So Rittenhouse, justified self-defense. The Arbery case, clearly a murder. There are really important lessons that we can take from both of these. I think for me, the most important lesson is you're not Batman. And if you guys can if that's what you take away from this is, like, if you have a carry permit, if you have a gun for home defense, what I want you to do in the light of both of these cases, which had, even though Kyle was acquitted, this is a life-altering outcome for him. No matter what, his life will never be the same. And I want you to go back, and this is something that was said to me this weekend. And I want you to go and I want you to think about what actions that you're willing to take that would result in you leaving someone behind, and how many people you're really comfortable leaving behind. So you're not Batman, guys. That's what I got. That's my takeaway. That's the end of this episode from my end. You're not Batman.
And I'll back that up. This is real life. This is real life. Your actions have real consequences. And the fact that you haven't considered all of those consequences is one of the leading elements in both of these cases. In Rittenhouse's case, it was self-defense, but there's still going to be very negative consequences for him for the rest of his life. And he's 18. So for the rest of his life, he's going to be Kyle Rittenhouse and have the consequences of being the guy who shot 3 people in Kenosha. They just happened to all be a pedophile, a domestic abuser, and a guy with some lesser charges whose arm he vaporized. Or you get to be the McMichaels, and the oldest one probably dies in prison. The second oldest one gets to spend most of his adult life in prison, and the third one, I don't know how old he is, but like they're going away. And from a 10,000 foot view of this thing, it's like, oh, these are 2 people, 2 separate people who had guns, who shot people who didn't have guns, except in the third case for Rittenhouse. And they both claimed self-defense with 2 very different legal outcomes. And it all had to do with the decisions made very immediately prior to the shoot, where Rittenhouse was very clearly trying to disengage from the situation. And then McMichaels were actively engaged in the confrontation in a situation where, despite, wanting to quote unquote defend and protect your neighborhood, this was not at the level of defend and protect, bring out the guns. This was not. This was not 4 dudes rolling through your neighborhood shooting at random houses. That would be yep, I shoot back.
Yeah.
This was
100% go chase those guys.
Yep. Absolutely. Engage those guys. Stop those guys. Protect your family. But that was not this. It was not. And you trying to say, well, I was in fear for my, it's the exact thing that Binger was trying to intimate that Kyle did. You don't get to be the one creating self-defense when you are the one who created the threat. The problem with Binger's argument wasn't that it wasn't true in its core element, because it was. If you're the one who creates the lethal threat, who escalates, your argument of self-defense is going to be very suspect. The problem with Binger's argument was that it wasn't true for Kyle. He wasn't the one who initiated the threat. Rosenbaum was, and then Huber was, and then Grosskreutz was. In the case of Ahmaud Arbery, he wasn't the one who initiated the lethal threat. The McMichaels were driving down with the truck and then hopping out with the guns. Like, absolutely, they're the lethal threat. They're the one who escalated, and the juries made those decisions. The jury made the decision in Rittenhouse case, self-defense. The jury made the decision in the McMichaels case, guilty of sin. They're going away for murder.
Yep. Well, and on that happy note, that's it for that's it for this week, guys.
Make smart decisions, guys.
Make
smart choices. Good choices.
Make good
choices that no result in prison.
Or people dying unless they really need to die.
Yeah, you and I will both agree that there are a list of people that do exist that should die. Sure. It's not very big.
No. Yeah. Anyway, guys, that's it for this week. Thanks everyone for watching, listening, liking, sharing, subscribing, and doing all those fun actions. This is the first week of December that you're listening to this, probably. So, we're starting to get into the Christmas season. Just a reminder that Lethal Weapon and Die Hard are both Christmas movies.
Correct.
We'll see you guys next week.